Thank you, Senator Casey. And we thank everyone who has come here today, and my colleagues, Senator Casey, Senator Cardin, Senator Van Hollen. Many Senate Republicans clearly are in denial that we live in a country where 91 Americans die each day from an opioid overdose, where 500,000 Americans could die from opioids over the next 10 years, where 500,000 Americans could die from opioid overdoses in the next 10 years. 10 Vietnam Wars worth of deaths from one cause. 2,000 people from Massachusetts died from an opioid overdose last year. If people were dying at the same rate across the whole country as they were dying in Massachusetts last year, that would be 100,000 deaths every single year. That would be 1 million deaths over 10 years. If my Republican colleagues would focus on something other than giving billions in tax breaks to the wealthiest in our country, they would hear the near unanimous calls from the experts and the pleas from mothers and fathers to stop the machete that the Republicans are taking to Medicaid, which will hurt the prevention and treatment programs which these families so desperately need. They would hear the alarm bells Americans across the country are ringing against this cruel and inhumane and immoral legislation that they just introduced this morning. But instead of accepting the truth and listening to their constituents, they have decided to take a cynical path and replace life-saving services with for substance abuse, treatment, and recovery. As we speak, Leader McConnell is unveiling the newest version of the legislation to his caucus, which is rumored to include an opioid fund of $45 billion over the next 10 years. Now, that might sound like a lot, but the Center for American Progress estimated that the Affordable Care Act, if it stayed as the law, would spend over $91 billion for opioid coverage alone over the next 10 years. That's double what the Republicans are announcing today that they are willing to spend on opioid treatment for the families in our country. Why would we spend half as much on a massive public health crisis that is only getting worse? There has been a lot of talk from Republicans about so-called fixes to help make Trumpcare better for millions of Americans suffering from substance use disorders. But this opioid fund is not a fix. It is a falsehood. It is a lie. It is a false premise to the people suffering from opioid addiction. It is a false future that won't include critical Medicaid funding for treatment and recovery services. And it's a false bargain that Republicans will make at the expense of families desperate for opioid addiction treatment. But America will not be fooled. These families will not be fooled. This opioid funding is nothing but a politically craven effort to buy votes from Republicans whose states are being ravaged by the prescription drug, heroin, and fentanyl crisis. And this bill will be a death sentence for the 33,000 Americans who die every single year from opioid overdoses. So what is happening today is the Republicans are introducing legislation as a sop to an issue and a constituency which is desperate for more help. We need even more than $90 billion to deal with this. We have to give every family in America access to the health care which they need. This is a blistering, scalding indictment of the immoral and cruel heart of this Republican bill, which they're introducing today. And we are going to fight it every single day for those families across the country who are desperate for help. Senator Cardin.
Well, let me